Hello, this is the third in 4 recordings that we're going to do from the business school. And today we've got the privilege of having Dr. Nubong, senior lecturer at the Department of Economics or the School for Economics, to talk to us a little bit about economic competitiveness. Introducing the theme, I just thought of yesterday we had the announcement of one of our big steel mills in Saldanha closing down. Is that due to the uncompetitiveness of South Africa? What is this thing called competitiveness? Is there a model that you can compare nations against each other in terms of competitiveness?
Right. Thanks so much for having me. Competitiveness is it's a measure that seeks to capture an abstract concept related to performance of nations. As complicated as nations are and as diverse as they are, it was developed to be able to create a common benchmark against which national performance can be assessed. So typically, the most famous report that tracks that is the Global Competitiveness Report that highlights a number of pillars around which the nations of the world are compared against each other.
Well, I'm very glad you're using the World Economic Forum's competitive report. Yeah. In the first slide that we will be showing, I'm showing that the total number. I think they measured 141 countries, South Africa number 60, yeah. But the people can look at that on the slide when it showed.
Yes. Yes, so they put together a total of 141 countries. In 2019, South Africa came 60th, which is an improvement for the last 2 years. In 2018, they were 62nd. In 2017, I think they were 61st. So there have been slight improvements, but they're still hovering around the same area. There have been some elements that explain the improvements from 2018, which would be improvements around institutions and health outcomes. But for an aspect like health, they are improving from a very low base because according to 2019 report, they were 118th in terms of health. So it's nothing too much to celebrate, but there's a sense in which you would want to imagine that there are certain interventions in the health sector that are producing results.
But how do you compare 141 countries to each other when some are small and very rich, like Singapore, and some are big and very poor? Are there categories?
They are classified into, broadly speaking, 3 categories that are basic requirements, efficiency enhancers, and innovation and sophistication, which is going to cater for the degree of development of the various economies. And your basic requirements look at issues like institutions, infrastructure, the macroeconomic environment, the health and primary education, which are essentially basic elements that every economy would have. Your efficiency enhancers, which speaks to economies that are efficiency driven, would look at your higher education and training, the goods market efficiency, labor market efficiency, the degree of financial market development, technology readiness, and market size, which would classically be evaluated by the size of the GDP. And with your technology leaders that are in the frontier of technology development, you're looking at your business sophistication and the innovative capacity of the economy. Obviously, all economies are not at the same stage in each of those pillars, but it provides a fairly good framework to carry out.
Now, where would South Africa fit in that framework?
South Africa would be somewhere transitioning between your factor-driven and your efficiency-driven economy, pretty much sitting well within, I would say, your factor-driven economy, given the elements at which it has advantages. Now, of the 4 elements of the factor-driven economy, South Africa sort of performs well on institutions, performs well on infrastructure. In terms of the macroeconomic environment, with the thrust that was established since the Trevor Manuel Finance tenureship, there has been some kind of macroeconomic stability and discipline in terms of macroeconomic management, performing less well in the 4th of those pillars on health and primary education. In the aspects where it seems to be struggling, in addition to this 4, when we think it's moving towards your efficiency, moving towards the 2nd pillar, you would want to think about elements about the financial market development with the JSE, the robustness of the financial and the banking system. Those would be elements that would be good. In the 2nd pillar, it would have to strengthen elements around higher education and training, the whole skills gap and skill.
I saw that in the report that very negative reporting on skills and skills development,
Absolutely.
as well as labor stability and all those kind of things.
Absolutely. If you look at that is the core weakness of the economy. It relates to the level of the unemployment and the employability of the unemployed, the whole structural nature of the fact that the economy is 60 to 70% service sector based, and which sector is intensive in the usage of skilled labor, which is not the characteristic of the largely unemployed population. So the lack of skills, this is skills upgrading that needs to help the economy bridge the divide between the growing sector of the economy and the skill set of those who are unemployed. That's the big major issue, and that is where your higher education and training, both your universities and your training institutions, vocational training, come in. So that is one of the major elements that affects the country's competitiveness, because the emerging economies and middle-income economies of a similar ranking like South Africa do not have the same kind of challenge that the country is facing. So
now, if we were to look forward, we had a huge investment conference in the last week or two, and South Africa is searching for some way to get its economy going.
Yeah.
Taking this as a reference, competitiveness, where would you, in future, invest? Where would you advise government, so to speak? Which areas to pay most attention to?
Straight up, the issue with investment and long-run growth is that it's growth in its nature. It's long run. There are no shortcuts to growth. There are low-hanging fruits that can be addressed in terms of service sector related investments, like the tourism sector. South Africa is a brand since from the days of Mandela. It's a top touristic destination, so there could be a huge source of contribution to growth coming from such low-hanging sectors that do not require heavyweight lifting. The parks are there, the Big Five is there, the Springbok just won the World Cup. There's a lot that can bring people to South Africa. So from that perspective, you would need to then address the deterrents, the things that prevent people from not wanting to come to South Africa.
Like crime.
Like crime, like the whole efficiency around the management, the whole service orientation of our offering, the whole brand South Africa, proudly South Africa. Address the things that project the country in the bad light. Unfortunately, bad news travels. 10 beautiful things can happen in South Africa. The one bad thing that happens, that's what CNN is going to carry. So those are low-hanging fruits. I mean, we did that during the 2010 World Cup. There was almost this nation together, project the image. It was as if there was this conversation with the crime lords to say, hey, bring it down. So that is a low-hanging fruit. But in the long run, in terms of the country's competitiveness, we cannot get around the skills issue. We cannot get around the capacity, the innovation capacity of the economy. And this is where, to address both the unemployment question and the skills readiness, to be able to be an economy that is ready for the fourth industrial revolution, we need to transform. We do not even have as many institutions of training as we need to be able to drive a technology-intensive economy. We are talking about the fourth industrial revolution, but we are still a primary resource exporting economy. So there's a lot of transformation that needs to happen. There's a lot that needs to go into industrialization, industrial policy, and trade policy that would bring about the structural and economic transformation of the economy to push it towards being a knowledge-driven economy. So it's skills, 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 and it needs to be perceived and seen much more as an investment, not just an expense, which brings us back to the conversation about fees-free education, for example. The economy is nowhere near where it should be in terms of the kinds of skills, in terms of number of engineers we are producing, in terms of just the strengthening of the health sector, which is one of the weakest. We are producing far less doctors than we do need. The public sector system, health system, is under such huge strain. And in all of that, we're still managing to use the politics to drive away the few doctors that we produce. So,
well, it was fascinating to talk to you. And just when the discussion got going, time is out. So thank you very much for participating today. And I hope in the future we can continue with this discussion. I think it's very important.
The pleasure was mine. Thanks so much for having me.